Ranch in Converse County. So I would ask that you help me welcome Jim Hageman and Bob Ide.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Bob and I have had a lot of experiences together. We've been friends since we were 10 and 11 years old, I think. This is the first time we've had the experience of being bossed around by the same person. She's a very persistent little rip. We do appreciate her. She doesn't always get her way with the liberty-hating crony capitalists down there, but they do know that they've been hit when she gets a hold of them. And we appreciate it. Kathy, we praise the Lord that you have the passion that you do and that you come here every week and do this, and we do appreciate it. First off, I guess Kathy went over the questions until afterwards. I'm so deaf that it would be a real torture if I tried to hear any question. I can hear her voice pretty well, so if you kind of address them to her, it's not that she bosses me around or anything, it's just I can understand her voice pretty well. My discussion of money is limited in scope of looking at money purely as a financial instrument. I choose not to go into the constitutionality of our current system. I use the term money and financial instrument and currency interchangeably. It is not my intent to slam bankers, as most of them that I know are very upstanding people. One final disclosure is that it's not our intent to push any one investment over another.
Ooh.
I don't know, can you read that?
Let's get some lights out.
It's warming up. Give it a second.
It'll get a little brighter.
Where's this little mic thing?
In the beginning, there was barter. It required the coincidence of wants by two or more parties. The seller of grain has to find a buyer who wants grain and who can offer in return something the seller wants. The history of money concerns the development of means of carrying out transactions involving the physical medium of exchange. Money is a clearly identifiable object of value that is generally accepted as payment for goods and services and a repayment of debts. Many things have been used as a medium of exchange in the markets, including, for example, livestock and sacks of cereal grain, such where the shekel was derived. Things directly useful in and of themselves. Can you hear me?
Oh, much better.
Yeah.
Attractive items such as cowrie shells and beads were exchanged for more useful commodities. Precious metals, from which early coins were made, were also used. The problem caused by the coincidence of wants brought about the need for a store of value, hence money. Commodity or rare substance money, such as cowrie shell, shekel, or unit of weight. Indians used beads and arrowheads. Prisoners used cigarettes. Revolutionaries used weapons. California, for a couple years, used vouchers. Every country has used PM. Commodity money makes markets more liquid. I guess going back to barter a little bit, Bob and I had lunch the other day, and he was telling me that his dad talked about growing up in Creston, Iowa in the 40s and 50s, and he said almost everything they did was traded. If you wanted a new bicycle, you traded your pogo stick. There wasn't that much money around. I can remember in the 60s going around Douglas, Wyoming with my grandma, and she would use eggs to pay her bills. So it was, people having money is kind of a new phenomenon. The real need for money came about to solve the problem of storing value. The value of our labor, machinery, brains, skills, energy, fuel, wealth. Store value is a function of an asset that can be saved, retrieved, and exchanged at a later time. It is predictably useful when retrieved. And I always thought of this as a good example of what we're trying to store with money. It represents labor, it represents machinery, it It represents brains and skills. It represents energy and fuel, and the wealth that went into it with the iron and the rubber and the glass. So what we're trying to do with money is store all those things. If someone worked for a full day running this machine, at the end of the day, he was given a money that was that stored that value to where he could use it at a later date. Contract law, or financial instruments and money. The use of contracts was a huge leap for financial instruments or money. Financial instruments allowed humans to go into the marketplace and do a deal without having to bring their commodity with them. A good example would be a silver certificate issued by individual banks that were redeemable in silver. Because of the trust factor, paper money was backed by some form of wealth. This silver certificate was issued by the Treasury from 1878 to 1964. They were originally redeemable for their face value in silver dollar coins. They were used up until 1968. And this one, I got down at the coin shop the other day, it says, this certificate, this certifies that there is on deposit in the U.S. Treasury of the United States of America $1 in silver payable to the bearer of this demand. Does anybody know how much this silver certificate would be worth?
$2.
I paid $1 for it. Chuck, I was going to give it to you, but
Okay.
I paid $1 at the coin shop the other day. He said he gives them out as tips, but you'd think they'd be worth more than that, wouldn't you? If you could still trade them in for their equivalent in silver dollar, I don't know how. I guess it'd be 1/15 of an ounce is what you could give for it right now. After money was trusted enough, that they went to a fiat money, which is a financial instrument declared by government to be legal tender. In other words, money because of government decree. Fiat money is a note without the mortgage or collateral. It is not directly backed by wealth. Its value, other than its BTU equivalent, is based entirely on trust. The more the trusted financial instrument has, it diminishes the need to be backed by wealth. And that's what essentially we have right now. We have a $20 bill that is decreed to be a $20 bill. There's nothing on there that says that it is backed by wealth. Essentially, this $20 bill is backed by the wealth of our country. Specifically, it's not tied to any one wealth. I guess it'd be a good point to distinguish the difference between currency and wealth.
Did you see the one I posted?
Currency is man-made, which would be the cash, and it came about for all the things we've talked about. Wealth, it'd be like this is a 10 troy ounce, 99% silver. This is wealth. It was God-made. I guess this tractor would represent wealth also, because it took wealth to mine the iron ore, took wealth for the rubber, took wealth for the building to manufacture it. Wealth is tangible things, where money is cash,
Glad you came in.
is paper, man-made. Trust. The more trust we have in a currency, the less we demand that it be backed up by wealth or collateral. If we have had a great deal of trust in the U.S. dollar for a long time. Studies of human behavior show that people have a hard time responding to threats that develop slowly. And that's probably why we still have a lot of trust for our dollar, is because it's taken time to come to grips with that it really is fiat money that is not unbacked by, that's being printed almost into extinction. We're spending unappropriated, unbacked, unprinted, unaudited, unconstitutional, unpaybackable, unimaginable, unaccountable digital entries or electronic currency. At the same time, we are rapidly putting into place a system that is able to trace every transaction.
What's in the way? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
executed by the individual. Today, there is an incredible amount of trust in the system. We have gone from contract secured silver certificates to a financial fiat paper, then to a digital entry or electronic entry. As we have gone into debt by $18 trillion, the US dollar index, when compared to the 5 other major currencies, has gone up 20% in the last couple of years. The US is the largest debtor in man's history, and our currency has dominated all other currencies. That is what I call trust. Incidentally, $1 trillion, if it was $1,000 stacked on top, $1,000 bills stacked on top of each other, would go from here to about 10 miles the other side of Douglas. $1 trillion is almost actuarially unpaybackable by the U.S. economy. To let alone to owe 18 trillion.
19 now.
I don't think they could tell you within 18 or 20 trillion how much they do owe. A quote from the 1525, nations are not ruined by one act of violence, but gradually and in an almost imperceptible manner by the depreciation of their circulating currency through excess quantity. In other words, printing. The laws of supply and demand dictates that every dollar printed makes the one in your pocket worth less. I just go into the difference between digital money versus paper money and why they want to get rid of paper money. Even though paper money is no longer directly backed by wealth, it does represent privacy, it represents liberty, it represents free trade, it represents choice. Paper money represents a way for the citizens to keep the banks from taking your money through negative rates. It is.
This is worse than a city council. Trying to listen to them on television. Jesus Christ.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello?
I think you recognize it.
How that's working.
Can you hear that?
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a second here. Let's just get it right.
Getting it close to his mouth, up on his collar.
One, two. Digital money versus paper money, or electronic money. Even though it is no longer backed by wealth, paper money represents privacy, represents liberty, it represents free trade, represents choice. Paper money represents a way for citizens to keep the banks from taking your money through negative rates. To our government, paper money represents a lack of control. They are unable to confiscate it at will. They are unable to track it. They cannot force you to pay the banks to store it. I would say that there is a caveat to that, in that they can take this at will. All they have to do is put a recall on any $20 bill that has, they can call it back into the system at will. But at present, and the way things are right now, it does represent all those things. Privacy, a free people should be able to do a lawful deal without a third party's knowledge. Liberty, I can better stand up for my constitutional rights if I have private transaction money. I can trade with whom I want or don't want without repercussions from others. Choice, with paper money I can decide that I do not wish to pay the banks to hold my money. If you go ahead. This is Professor Joseph Saleno. He's a professor of economics at Pace University. He explains why they want to get rid of cash. If you could go to minute 439.
Canadian countries have negative rates on government bonds and so on. So I think that's something that they'd like to push. In the United States, for example, macroeconomists, some famous ones, are calling for negative nominal interest rates. But the only way they can really do that is to lock people's deposits into the banking system. And that's where the war on cash comes in. They would love to restrict the use of cash and maybe even abolish it if they could in the United States, so that people would have to use deposits. So that means that banks could pay them -5%, for example. That is, if you have a $1,000 deposit, at the end of the year, you would wind up with $950. But since there's an absence of cash, you wouldn't be able to withdraw your funds from the bank. So that's why they hate and fear cash. And the second reason for the fear is that, as we see in Greece, when people stop trusting the banking system, they begin to pull the money out, the banking system begins to collapse. So locking money into the banks, not allowing people to use cash and withdraw their cash is another way of propping up a very unsound and a dangerously flawed banking system that we have.
I would agree, dangerously flawed right now. But is this war on cash really, and I'm using this terminology, war on cash, really another way, a tool that has to be implemented if in fact you do want to push negative nominal rates on interest rates to continuously drive down the cost of funding for governments that are heavily indebted right now? Is that too much of a leap?
No, I think that it's a bit of a leap, but I think that that's part of what they're aiming at.
Okay. This gal, or Ellen Brown, I think she does a great job of explaining the relationship we have with our banks. If you could go.
I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that if Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Citibank, any of the big 5 or 6 banks in the United States were to encounter the kind of difficulties they did in 2007, 2008, that, and I understand Dodd-Frank addresses this, that the federal government's not going to bail them out. So instead, they're going to go to people like you and me and say, you've got $35,000 sitting in your savings account in my bank. We're going to take it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, first they will take the bondholders and the shareholders, the known investors. But what most people don't realize is that the depositors are also regulated in the bank. When you put your money in the bank legally, ever since the 19th century, it becomes the property of the bank, and what you have is an IOU. So you have a demand deposit, the right to demand your money when they're supposed to give you the money when you demand it. But the problem is, if there's nothing there, if the derivatives players step up to the plate first, which they're allowed to do under the Bankruptcy Reform Act of 2005 and under the Dodd-Frank Act, there might not be anything there for you to be paid with. Now, you're supposed to be insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation up to $250,000. And we probably are. I mean, we're probably safe, certainly for the time being. But here's the problem. The fund only has $67 billion in it to insure over $6 trillion in deposits. They have a credit line with the Treasury of $500 billion, but that's just a loan. So who's going to pay that loan back? When the FDIC fund went over budget by $8 billion, did I say trillion? It's $500 billion. When they went over budget by $8 billion in 2009, it nearly broke the small banks that were members of the FDIC. So if you had a really large overdraft with the Treasury of the FDIC fund that the premium payers had to make up for, you would totally bankrupt the little banks. And you could argue that that's the whole purpose here, is to force the small banks to sell out to the big banks so that we just have a few big banks in control.
So when I put money into one of the big banks, I'm not loaning them my money, I am giving them my money. The title to that money is now theirs. They own my money. And in exchange for that, they give me an IOU, which is basically my bank statement or my checkbook, that presumably I can draw against. Do I have that right?
What?
Draw against. Do I have that right?
Wow.
That just, when she talked about derivatives, I don't know if that's what's scaring the banks into talking about negative interest rates, but it seems like something has really got them nervous. That they would, someone that said that we're going to improve our economy by having negative interest rates and not getting laughed off the stage is incredible to me. Negative interest rates does not mean that they're going to pay you to borrow money. It means that they're going to charge you to keep your money in their bank. And how that is ever going to improve our economy is either they think we're really stupid or they're really nervous about what is facing them with the derivatives. Anyway, for the last couple of days or months, I've read countless articles proclaiming the need for banks to eliminate cash. Bill Gates is pushing for a cashless society. He said that even third world countries have enough technology they can do everything electronically. Norway's biggest bank demands a cash ban. The war of paper currency begins. ECB votes to scrap the 500 euro. Germany joins the trend toward cashless society. The establishment and pushing cashless society to control humanity. Just yesterday, Larry Summers was the Treasury Secretary between 1999 and 2001. He called for the elimination of a $100 bill. And I was just reading that article, that would take about 78% of the value out of our currency just by eliminating the $100 bill. I won't read the whole thing, but it's a fascinating story that the guy that used to sign $100 bills is now calling for the elimination of them. I don't think they're even making the argument that it's to stop drug dealers or to keep the people from laundering money. They're just a way of forcing us back into the system. Just today there was quite a few articles on different entities that are pushing for a cashless society. A year ago, Matt Mead vetoed a bill that would have required criminal conviction before a state can seize your cash or your private property. I just read in Guernsey Gazette last week that in Cody they seized a plane and $250,000, and he's now trying to sue them to get it back. They've more or less charged them with unregistered plane, and so what they're saying is that it's a $250,000 plane plus fine plus the loss of a plane because you had it unregistered. These people did do some things that were maybe could be construed as questionable, but still, without a conviction, I don't think you should be able to take their property. Under the Fifth Amendment of our Constitution, you can't take people's property without just compensation. These are some of the questions that I think we need to start asking ourselves. Why pay a bank to store our money? If we make cash illegal, will we have a choice? Is cash already illegal and subject to forfeiture? Are there ways we can create private transactions without government oversight? I would contend that our cash is already somewhat illegal, and that if you try and take $10,000 out, you have to fill out some government forms. If you try and take out $1,000 this month, $2,000 next month, and $7,000 a month after that, they call it a structured withdrawal, and you're subject to the same laws. So I contend that we're already facing persecution for wanting liberty-minded cash. Again, I would ask the question, what are the big banks anticipating that would cause them to want a bail-in? I think that's something that we need to ask. And the good news is that we can work toward making ourselves self-sufficient by keeping ourselves sovereign, private, and independent. We can work toward creating financial instruments that allow for private transactions. We can own things that have a good chance of being widely needed. We can try to own things that are widely perceived of having value. We can create agreements between each other and make those agreements tradable. We can create an exchange through the internet. Our imagination is the only limiting factor. When I was reading a story about a boy in the Depression. He went to get a job as a paper salesman. And when he got there 20 minutes early, and there was a line of 22 boys ahead of him. Well, instead of him just saying, well, I'm never going to get that paper job, he sat down and he did one of the hardest things known to man, and that was he thought of a solution to his problem. He scratched out a note and he handed it to the boy ahead of him, and he said, could you send this up to the secretary? So the secretary got the note, she unwrapped it, she got a chuckle, and she walked in and took it to her boss, and he got a chuckle, and the note said, I'm number 22 outside, don't do nothing till you talk to me. So that boss knew that boy was going to sell a lot of newspapers, so number 22 in line got the job. Another example of people working around the system and getting things they want is we have a 9-year-old friend from Torrington that during the Depression he was out in Washington State, and he showed up for a job to be a truck driver. And when he got there, he was like number 12 or 14 or whatever, and they interviewed a few people, and pretty soon, about 3 people before them, they announced that they'd hired all the truck drivers for the day. And so instead of him just going home and telling his wife another day without a paycheck, he waited till the boss wasn't busy, and he said, now what if I had my own truck? Would you hire me then? And the boss said, well, sure, we'd give you $10 a day for your truck, $20 for your labor. So he knew another guy that had some trucks sitting idle because of the Depression. He offered him $5 a day for the truck, and then he got $20 a day for himself. So instead of accepting defeat, he made another $5 a day just by thinking of ways around the problem that he was faced with. I think that's the same thing that we're going to have to do if we decide that we want to be sovereign, independent, and liberty-minded. We're going to have to create our own ways of doing things. I did financial counseling at our church for 3 years, and during that time, meeting with people that were in really bad financial shape to meeting with people who are just trying to be better stewards, I was exposed to 3 attitudes that I believe they set free from worry and anxiety about money. Because a lot of what we're talking about today would maybe cause people to have anxiety about money. Think of money as a gift or a blessing. Ask the Lord to watch over and care for it and give you wisdom in His stewardship. Make it available to others in need. Philippians 4:12, I know what it is like to be in need, and I know what it is like to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I'll end my talk by asking a couple of questions. How can we have freedom without free enterprise?
Correct.
I think we'll take a 5-minute break, and then